Sara Bernstein, you produced Rebuilding Paradise, an incredible documentary which follows the residents of Paradise, California, as they rebuild their town after the 2018 wildfires. First of all, do you remember where you were when those devastating fires happened?
I do. I was actually in New York City. We had just a few months earlier launched our new documentary division, Imagine Documentaries for Imagine Entertainment, which is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's company. And my partner, Justin Wilkes, who's also my producing partner, one of our producers on the film, and I were in our office, and we got a call from Ron Howard, basically saying, I've been watching the news. I'm so concerned about what's happening there. He had family in the area. His mother-in-law had lived in Paradise, California, not at that point, but several years back, and he was familiar with it. And he was like to us, "What do you think? Do you think there's something here? Is there something we can do? Should we go see if there's a story? Is there something we can do for this town and on this town?" And that's when we mobilized.
So when you first arrived there, what was the community? What was the community like immediately receptive to you, or are they still kind of just in the aftermath of?
I mean, the community they were certainly in the aftermath. I mean, more than 50,000 people had been displaced. I think there were a lot of news crews around, certainly in those early days following this devastation. And I think people were just really, they were desperate. I mean, they didn't know where they were going to live. Their whole town had essentially burned down. They didn't know if they had jobs. They were still concerned about loved ones. But what became, really sort of clear to us is that there was a desire to express and to share what they were going through. And we're obviously incredibly grateful that the community was so gracious and really opened up our team to spending this time with them. But I think there was also, as what happens with these documentaries, I think there was a level of trust that kind of came with that. As well as I think, it's interesting having worked in documentaries for a long time, and especially having been involved in other documentaries that chart sort of the aftermath of some, a horrible scenario or some sort of devastation or devastating act. The news crews sort of descend, but then after a week or so, they leave. But what doesn't leave, obviously, is the aftermath of the disaster itself and the pain that, people suffer and go through. And so I think there's something, inherently open and probably ultimately sort of appreciative when, someone comes in and basically commits to staying and sort of charting that journey.
Yeah, and you guys filmed there for a year. So how did you come up with the idea to spend a year there? And also, as you were filming them for that year, did you think about where they would be in November 2019, or is that not something you think about? Like, you can't think like that as a documentarian, you just have to let it unfold.
Well, I mean, it's look, I mean, I think one could still follow the community in Paradise, California. I mean, clearly California, and certainly very close to Paradise, California, was devastated again by wildfires just this past summer and early fall season. So I think with all documentaries, particularly verite documentaries, you somehow have to draw a line, and you somehow have to say, what is that end point? Because especially with, this wonderful town and the subjects who so graciously opened their lives to us, you could spend so much more time with them than just a year. But I think for us, and certainly for Ron, I think a year in the aftermath became, it was a goalpost. It was a goalpost for the town to see what kind of recovery and what kind of rebuilding could actually happen within a year. And for us, I think it felt like a good natural point to end sort of the filming process and to be able, like I said, to sort of really chart kind of the progress, both obviously personally for people and also for the community itself.
Yeah, the film is really a human story about resilience and people's commitment to one another. And it's not really about the cause of the fire, which is an easy path to go down, but you do talk about PG&E a little bit, and you touch on climate change. So how do you want to show those elements without diverting attention away from the people that the movie is about?
Well, I mean, I think that this is what's for me, so appealing about verite filmmaking. And I think it's, it's obviously a common theme throughout this entire panel, it feels like, to a degree, is that, look, it was important to shine a light on these issues, right, that sort of come with this extended fire season. It used to be that fire season was 1 or 2 months during the year. Now it's almost year round in California, or certainly in that part of California. So climate change is definitely an undertone to this story. The PG&E settlement was important because that through line was definitely, it was important to the community. There was definitely there was a narrative that had to be explored. But I think with the best verite films, and I was hoping that our film would accomplish this, I think it was much easier and more important for us to see that storyline, or that thread, I should say, through the eyes of our subjects and the way that they were experiencing it, so that the audience would still get the information that was necessary, but that it was coming from, to your point, a place of personal experience, from an emotional experience, as opposed to information that was being fed to you through more specific interviews. And to be honest, it wasn't really about pointing fingers. How did this happen? It was really about, this could happen and this did happen. And to your point, how does a community face that? What is the courage that's necessary? What is the resilience that they must drum up? And also, what is, really the responsibility of the community to itself, the government agencies to communities like this, and really for everybody? Just, we have to prepare, because these natural kind of what we could consider sort of climate change caused disasters are not going to go away. And I think you see at the end of the film, we have, what we consider sort of this coda, where you sort of zoom out from paradise and you see hurricanes and tornadoes and other, natural devastation that is only intensifying. And in some ways, you can look at this community and think like, this is a climate change refugee story in some ways. And it's happening here in the United States and in California, no less. So I think this is a long-winded way of answering the question, but I think we were hoping, and certainly Ron was hoping, that information would come across, but it would really come through our subjects' experiences first and foremost.
Yeah, I really love the ending, because you also start with like the students raising money for the victims in Alabama. So it was a nice way of pulling out to make it macro, and then you show all the other, places around the world. So did you guys always know you were going to end it like that?
No, and we really, really struggled. And this was something, again, that Ron really went back and forth on, because it was really important for him that this film could demonstrate sort of what was happening globally, and that this wasn't just happening to one community. But clearly, the deeper and deeper we got into sort of the verite filmmaking and the idea that, okay, we really are just charting this one community over the course of a year, it didn't feel appropriate until we could close the chapter, so to speak, on the community itself. And to your point, certainly that scene with the kids sort of raising money and realizing that now they know there's empathy there. They understand what it's like for a community or for another, another kid their age to lose their home, and that they want to do something about it. So it was the natural way, I think, to extend into that.